of the Federals controlling Fort Sumter. General P.G.T. Beauregard was ordered to demand Fort Sumter's evacuation, but Major Anderson, commanding the Federals at Fort Sumter, refused. Beauregard, apparently the most altruistic human being that ever existed, warned Anderson of the force to come. And again, as was repeated often in the narrative, at 4:30 a.m. on April 12, 1861, there was a shot from Fort Johnson. And there's a lot more that I say, obviously, in this first chapter, but that sort of gives you a taste of some of the things that I'm saying. But to get all academia on you, that's a word, these are sort of the main arguments that I'm actually trying to make regarding the Fort Sumter. So what I do is I have a lot of that type of travel writing stuff, but I end up trying to make three basic arguments and then, of course, supporting those arguments in my prose. I have three general arguments in this first chapter. First, that Fort Sumter site and thus the tour supply dialogic rhetorical frames between emancipatory discourses and reconciliatory discourses, but also supplies lost cause mythology. Furthermore, there are general dialogic relationships between remembrance and forgetting, slave and master, life and death, ghosts or specters, or implied ghosts/specters, and the effective lived embodied experience of the tourist. That is, the site is multivocal in many ways, not just about the causes of the Civil War. Second, the tourist site and the tourist experiences help foster an ambiguous sense of tourist/citizen identity, as well as tourist/national community that opens up the possibilities of reading lost cause mythology in critical embodied ways. Finally, all tourist sites like Fort Sumter, battlefields or not, become memory spaces/places that posit possible positions or possible ways to approach present social problems. Therefore, I suggest that the Fort Sumter National Monument serves as a reservoir for approaching current issues of racial tension, economic inequality, and the like in South Carolina and the United States more broadly. Let me move to vignette from Chapter 3. And Chapter 3 is the Magnolia Plantation tour. And there's lots of things that I could do here, but what I decided to focus on in my presentation here, which is just part of the chapter, is the nature tour. If you've ever taken the nature tour, it's pretty interesting. The Magnolia Plantation, along with its gardens in South Carolina, in Charleston, South Carolina, is ridiculously gorgeous. And for an amateur gardener such as I am, that is someone who throws random vegetation in the dirt and actually grows, this is sort of a pilgrimage to Mecca. In a 1900 Baedeker guide, which today would be like a Fodder's or Fromer's or even Rick Stevens' guidebook, early 20th century tourists learned that there were basically three things a tourist must see in North America: Niagara Falls, the Grand Canyon, and Magnolia Plantation. It is also, so the brochure tells me, the first planned tourist site in the United States. This is where the camellia was first introduced in the Carolinas. I have three in my backyard. This is the Garden of Eden on the Ashley River. But am I here for the garden? I don't know. Apparently, the owner of the Magnolia Plantation during the Civil War era, Reverend John Drayton, called his slaves black roses. How sweet. Drayton's aunts, Angelina and Sarah Grimke, had been kicked out of South Carolina for their abolitionist sentiments, but Reverend Drayton, bless him, was affectionate toward his black roses. He gave them religion and built, to the contrary of South Carolina law, a school for them. So the nature tour. Dan is our guide. He drives the longest tram and offers a narrative over the intercom. The tram has several cars. Dan's the man. He's quick with the jokes. He's a nature dude. He has a book that he's peddling as we go. It's hard to hear him as we trek along trails. Often tree limbs make their way to our faces. A woman in front of me got whacked by some innocent, unkept shrubbery, and I told her I thought that was the nature bit of the nature tour. Folks are looking around. The tram is loud, and Dan is telling some story about meeting an orangutan that wore diapers. Dan goes by the nickname, the Snake Man. He said the orangutan kissed him on the cheek for about a minute, though it felt like an hour. This is Dan's way of welcoming us to the world-famous nature train. He said folks from Egypt were on this world-famous train this morning. Last week, folks from India and Iceland and Australia and Germany and England or Brazil. He said or. Dan has been giving tours on this world-famous nature train since 1995 on Saturdays. This is quite a distinct pleasure. This is Dan the Snake Man. I'm on the world-famous Magnolia Plantation and Gardens nature train. He starts describing trees. He points out some ducks on the pond. Oh, we're going to watch for alligators. We might see some turtles as well. We're told not to worry about the dragonflies. This is important history stuff. Oh, there's an alligator on the trail in front of us. Folks jump up to see. The alligator quickly gets in the water, likely scared to death. Dan points out some birds. He makes some weird comment about it being Father's Day weekend and says hi to the fathers. Lots of egrets out there, too. His stream of consciousness or unscripted non-stop talking is rather annoying. He talks about having to rescue a rattlesnake from the petting zoo that very morning. I'm not sure if he's making this stuff up or not. I really want off the nature train. He points out squirrels. Really, Dan? Squirrels? Fascinating. We pass the slave cabins, and Dan says a tiny bit about an archaeological dig being conducted nearby by the Boy Scouts of America. God bless the Boy Scouts of America, Dan declares, his rate of speech slowed for impact. Dan shuts up for a second because he doesn't want to interrupt the current From Slavery to Freedom tour. He points out a humongous oak tree. One tree is over 300 years old. By now, this nature train tour seems 300 years old. Then comes really the only interesting part of the nature tour. It is an unexpected chance find by Dan, I think. An odd species on this tour, I should hope. There is a large group of mammals to our left, and they have congregated there to eat. Reverend Drayton might have called them his black roses. I quote Dan the Snake Man at some length. "Oh, mama, how y'all doing today?" He is talking to a group of African Americans picnicking, not the tourists on the tram. "Looks like there's some good cooking going on here today. That's the Leach family, folks. The Leach family is here. I saw some of them. Johnny Leach is about 92 or 93 years of age. He's still working here as master gardener. He loves it that much. Over to my left is a yellow-bellied slider turtle." And Dan goes on, the Leach family, just another exotic species to see on this world-famous nature train tour. Little vignette from Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is about the Battle of Aiken reenactment. I enter the gate-like opening area pretty early in the morning at the Confederate Memorial Park on Powell Pond Road. The first thing I notice, I can buy a Battle of Aiken t-shirt to support the sons of Confederate veterans. A man in a Confederate uniform approaches me. "First time here?" he asks. "Yeah," as I start to regret wearing blue jeans and a blue shirt. He shows me where I can buy a corn dog, but he's much more interested in telling me where to find the sutler tents. Sutlers were civilian merchants who sold provisions to the military, but I really don't know what to expect from a sutler in 2014. I walk into one of the tents. Wow, this is a Civil War gap. I can buy reenacting clothing, period 10. There are several of these sutler tents selling generally the same stuff. The tents are arranged as if this was one big giant shopping mall. My consumptive yearnings kick in. I want to buy stuff. This isn't about reenacting. This is retail heritage. But this stuff is expensive. I walk around for an hour going from sutler tent to sutler tent. I look at hats, try hats on. I look at myself in the mirror trying hats on. I look Civil War chic. There are loads and loads of full military uniforms, different ranks and all, reenactors and others can buy. There are also loads of civilian clothing, planter hats and the like. They also sell sewing kits and fabric for women's dresses. The Sutler Mall becomes more crowded as more and more spectators / actors / participants / rebels / federals arrive. Several spectators are in period costume. I soon figure out that the spectators or reenactors are often one and the same. This is playing dress-up. This is where certain ideologies become embodied through clothing, costuming as epistemology. And along with the costuming come the performances of certain gestures appropriate for the period, particularly with greetings and salutations. Men take off their hats and bow to the ladies. The women curtsy back. The whole thing is freaky. There's been much work on fashion theory, drawing from Marx to Weber and onward. While generally a class marker of fashion or costuming and or aesthetic appreciation of fashion, like period clothing perhaps, showcases, quote, this is from Scott, desires to identify or disidentify with associated social groups, end quote. And yes, this is all about consumption in the sense of buying such identity or disidentity. Certainly the act of buying and wearing these costumes in a process of mediation is a process of mediation that sustains consumptive hegemonic processes, but such mediation also enters into, literally, a symbolic container that demands or at least invites certain epistemologies, or the threads, literally, of heritage. The costuming itself, the producing, the wearing, the gesturing, and behavior while wearing such costuming are all liminal processes. The threadings are thresholds of timelessness where participants can literally leave 2014 and return to the Civil War, and through such costuming embody the various contours of 19th century classed, gendered, raced, whatever, mannerisms, thoughts, actions, political perspectives, and the like. In short, wearing Civil War fashion is important here. Good thing the settler tits take credit cards. Little vignette from Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is about the self-guided walking car tour that you can take here in this area, sponsored by the Columbia Convention Bureau Center. Sherman and his army coming towards Columbia, taking Columbia, etc., etc., etc. The first stop is labeled Congaree Creek. The brochure says I can see the exact site from Old State Road, marked by a large pipe on bridge. It just says, on bridge. What bridge? What pipe? The map, I quickly discover, is old. The city of Casey has redone State Street, closed part of the old new State Street, and I will soon discover they have closed much of Old State Street. It's confusing. I know at first glance really not to follow the map, but to use the newish 12th Street extension to get to the first site. The narrative, just reading this, no audio, and I don't advise reading and driving at the same time, but of course I did some of that, offers the context or description of the first and really only skirmish of the whole ordeal that happened the afternoon of February 15th, 1865. What I'm trying to do in this particular chapter is follow a little bit of the work of Michael Bowman, and Dr. Huell knows Michael Bowman well. He was at LSU, he retired. And he's done a lot of work on Civil War tourism, and he suggests that the tourist oftentimes becomes a theorist in the process of doing tourism. So a lot of his tourism prose is really about his own tour, his own journey, and he moves to discuss more theoretically the connection between tourist/theorist. On some of the stuff that he has done in his Civil War tourist trek, Bowman goes to Chancellorsville, where Stonewall Jackson had lost his arm. In a small visitor center, Bowman comes across a postcard of a tombstone for Stonewall Jackson's arm. Bowman skirts the sanctioned tour and seeks to find this tombstone. Again, this memorial or altar to Stonewall's arm isn't part of the regular scripted sanctioned car tour. That is, Bowman seems intent on finding this tombstone even though it's not one of the authorized texts of the tour. This kind of tourist/theorist process suggests, in part, a crafting of one's own script that embraces chance encounters and other unauthorized sites as part of the co-authored tour. But everything is always intertextual, and as tourists, we're always passive and reflexive. We always seek control and want to give it away all at the same time. This is all to say that I found myself, sort of like Bowman, chasing down things, both authorized and not, letting my mind and my body wander and wander, wondering and wandering about authenticity, history, public memory, rhetoric, performance, tourism, and Sherman's march on Columbia South Carolina.